You're standing on a shoreline, and the land you need to reach is invisible, somewhere past the horizon, across water with currents strong enough to sweep away anything that isn't built to survive them. There's no map, no compass, no engine, and behind you, the option to just stay put and never find out what's on the other side. And yet, at some point, someone didn't stay put. They built something that could float, loaded it with people who trusted them completely, and pushed off into open water toward a destination they couldn't even see. Today, crossing an ocean means boarding a plane and watching a screen count down the hours. For most of human history, crossing open water meant risking everything on a vessel built by hand, using nothing but wood, fiber, and trial and error. So how did people figure out how to do that at all? Let's start with a discovery that genuinely stunned the archaeologists who found it. On the Indonesian island of Flores, researcher Mike Morwood led excavations that uncovered stone tools dating back roughly 1 million years, tools that could only have been made and used by hominins who were not modern humans. That fact alone is remarkable. But here's the detail that changed everything. Flores sits across a deep-water channel known as the Wallace Line, a stretch of ocean with currents strong enough that even during the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, it never fully closed into a land bridge. You're not looking at someone who wandered across dry land by accident. Whoever reached Flores that early had to cross open water, deliberately, roughly 1 million years before Homo sapiens even existed as a species. Some researchers have proposed these early hominins reached the island accidentally, perhaps swept out to sea on floating vegetation during a storm. But the sheer number of successful crossings needed to establish a breeding population makes pure accident difficult to fully explain. Something resembling deliberate water transport increasingly looks like the more consistent answer. To test whether primitive rafts could realistically survive an open water crossing like that, archaeologist Robert Bednarik ran a series of experimental projects, building simple rafts using only tools and materials that would have been available to early hominins: bamboo, vines, basic cutting tools, no metal, no rope as you'd recognize it. His team then attempted to actually paddle these rafts across stretches of open ocean, similar to the Wallace Line. The rafts worked, not perfectly, not without real danger, but well enough to demonstrate that crossing open water with Stone Age technology wasn't just possible. It was survivable, repeatable, and within reach of people with nothing more than sharp stones and patience. Bednarik's crews didn't get it right on the first attempt. Early raft designs capsized or drifted uncontrollably, and paddlers dealt with genuine physical exhaustion trying to fight currents that modern sailors still respect. But each failed attempt refined the design a little further: tighter lashings, better buoyancy, smarter timing around tides, until the crossings became consistently survivable. That process, fail, adjust, try again, is engineering in its most basic form, whether or not the people doing it had a word for it. Think about what that means for how you picture early hominins. This wasn't a modern human innovation. Whatever crossed the Wallace Line predates your own species entirely, which means ocean-capable rafts may be one of the oldest pieces of technology tied to any human relative. Full stop. If boats existed that early, what about actual evidence of people using them for something beyond just crossing? Archaeologist Sue O'Connor excavated a rock shelter called Jaramalai on the island of Timor, and what she found pushed the story even further. Buried in layers dated to roughly 42,000 years ago, her team recovered fish bones, including remains from tuna, a fast, powerful, deep-water species that simply cannot be caught from shore or in shallow water. You don't catch tuna with your hands standing in the surf. Tuna require a vessel capable of reaching open ocean, staying stable, and returning safely with a catch. Whoever left those bones at Jaramalai wasn't just crossing water out of necessity. They had developed offshore fishing as a reliable, repeatable food source, requiring boats sophisticated enough to handle deep water on a routine basis, not just once, in an emergency. Alongside the tuna bones, O'Connor's team also recovered fish hooks made from carved shell, some of the oldest known fishing hooks anywhere in the world. That detail matters almost as much as the boats themselves. Catching a tuna isn't a matter of luck once you're offshore. It requires the right gear, the right bait, and the patience to understand a fish's behavior well enough to catch it consistently. Boats got people to the fish. Hooks are what turned that trip into a food source you could count on. If you're enjoying discovering how advanced, primitive technology really was, hitting subscribe means you won't miss the next one like this. Back to the water. Picture a group standing at the edge of Timor roughly 42,000 years ago, pushing a simple watercraft out past the breakers at dawn. They're not fleeing anything. They're not desperate. They're heading out deliberately, using accumulated knowledge about currents, timing, and the behavior of open water fish, knowledge that had to be built, tested, and passed down before anyone could rely on it for daily survival. Here's the twist that reframes almost everything you probably assumed about early human technology. Boats, or at least functional watercraft, appear to be older than settled agriculture, older than pottery, older than most of what people typically picture when they imagine ancient innovation. Long before anyone built a permanent structure or domesticated a single plant, some hominin somewhere had already solved one of the hardest engineering problems imaginable: how to survive open ocean using nothing but natural materials and careful design. That timeline runs counter to the usual assumption that technology builds in a tidy, predictable order: fire, then tools, then agriculture, then eventually boats. Ocean crossings show up shockingly early, which suggests the drive to explore, to see what's past the horizon, may be one of the oldest and most persistent instincts your lineage carries. It's worth being honest about the uncertainty still built into this story. Nobody has recovered an actual raft from 1,000,000 years ago. Wood and fiber simply don't survive that kind of timescale. The case for deliberate crossings rests on strong circumstantial evidence: the presence of tools on islands that should have been unreachable, combined with experiments showing the technology was well within reach, rather than a raft anyone can point to and touch. Researchers continue to debate exactly how intentional those earliest crossings really were. You still carry a version of that instinct, even if it rarely gets tested against real ocean currents. It's there when you choose the unfamiliar route home, when you book a trip to somewhere you've never been, when the unknown pulls at you more than it repels you. That pull isn't a modern personality quirk. It's closely related to whatever compelled someone, hundreds of thousands of years ago, to look at open water with no visible destination and decide the crossing was worth the risk. The next time you watch a plane cross an ocean in a few uneventful hours, remember that the entire concept, deliberately crossing open water toward land you can't see, was already solved by hominins who weren't even your species yet, using tools you could make with your bare hands and enough patience to actually try. If uncovering the real story behind technology you take for granted fascinates you, there's a lot more prehistory to explore, so make sure you're subscribed for the next one.